Hello everyone, my name is Karen Hudson and I am a librarian at the Salt Spring Island Public Library. And I'm so happy that you could all be here tonight, and I want to say thanks to Harry Warner for providing us with the introductory music. I just have to say on behalf of myself and the Salt Spring Island Public Library and Sedina and everyone over at Salt Spring Books, how thrilled we are that not only is Patrick Taylor now a resident of Salt Spring Island, but that he's chose tonight and Barb's Bakery and Bistro to launch his first book on Salt Spring Island. We're so happy to have him here. And what an honor it is to have a New York Times and Globe and Mail best-selling author here with us tonight. And he is going to be reading from his latest book, which is his 9th book overall. And it is from the Irish Country Doctor series, and it's the 6th book in that series. He's already written the 7th book, but we're going to have to wait till next year for that one, so maybe we'll all be back here then. But tonight's book is a Dublin Student Doctor, and I'm sure you're in for a treat. So let's all welcome Patrick Taylor.
Can you hear me at the back? If you can't, I have a habit of dropping my voice. If you can't, gesticulate, please. You've come foolishly to hear me, I hope you can. Harry, Coramila Mahala, thank you very much. Grand entertainment, sir, as always. Barb and the Bistro, thank you very much for hosting this, the bookstore and the library. I am going to read you tonight not just from a Dublin Student Doctor, but from some of the other Irish country books. I pause from time to time to take questions. I'll take questions at the end. And I notice a number of your books. Later I have brought my pen, if you want them signed. If you have questions when I'm speaking, stand up and ask. I'm happy to be interrupted. I started writing this series, I suppose, about 25 years ago now, when I was a columnist for a humour magazine. I developed this crusty old country general practitioner, Dr. Fingal Flaherty O'Reilly. And I just set a young man called Barry Laverty, fresh out of medical school, as his junior assistant, because you can't write a novel if there's no conflict. And the conflict there is between this crusty old boy set in his ways and this young man who's convinced he was right. And the first book was called An Irish Country Doctor, and I'm going to read you just a little bit from that to start with, just to set the mood of this evening. Barry has become convinced already that he's made a horrendous mistake joining this man in his practice. And of course, back in Ireland in those days, most of the GPs practiced from their own homes. They'd converted their front living room to what was called the surgery. And what probably was the scullery was the waiting room. There were no appointments. And the patients would come into the waiting room, the doctor would go down, an honour system, next patient would come through, and then he would show them out through the front door. As he explained to Barry, it stops them swapping symptoms and demanding the same treatment the one in front got. O'Reilly's full of tricks like this. And Barry is sitting in for his first surgery with O'Reilly. O'Reilly goes back to the waiting room and he says, "All right, how many of you are here for tonics?" Several people rose. He counted. 5, 6. "All right, I'll take you lot first. Hang on a minute." O'Reilly turned and headed for the surgery, and Barry followed. He watched as O'Reilly produced 6 hypodermics, filled them with a pink fluid from a rubber-topped bottle, and laid them in a row on a towel on top of a small wheeled trolley. "What's that, Dr. O'Reilly?" Barry asked. O'Reilly grinned. "Vitamin B12. "B12? But that's not..." "I know, Jesus, man, I know it's not a tonic. There's no such thing. You know it's not a tonic." But his grin widened and widened. "They don't know it's not a tonic. Now go and get them." All of them? Every last one. Barry headed for the waiting room. Heavens above, this was hardly the kind of medicine he'd been told. He avoided the stares that greeted him and said, "Would all those for tonics please follow me?" The 6 victims did so, meekly, silent. His little procession trooped into the surgery where O'Reilly waited by the trolley. "Along the couch," he said. 3 men and 3 women dutifully faced the examination couch. "Bend over." 3 trousered and 3 calico dressed backsides were presented. Barry watched, mouth agape, as O'Reilly moved his trolley to the start of the line. He stopped and grabbed a syringe in one hand, a methylated spirits reeking cotton wool ball in the other. He dabbed the calico over the first derriere with a ball. Listerine antisepsis he intoned as he jabbed the needle home through the dress. "Ouch!" yelped the skinny woman. The process was rapidly repeated down the line. Dab, jab, ouch! Dab, jab, ouch! Until O'Reilly stood before the final victim, a woman of massive proportions. He dabbed and stabbed. The hypodermic flew across the room as if propelled by a giant catapult and stuck in the wall, quivering like a well-thrown dart. O'Reilly shook his head, filled another syringe and said, "Jesus, sissy, how many times have I to tell you, don't wear your stays on tonic day?" "Oh, Dominic, I'm sorry. I forgot." "Right," said O'Reilly, "off you go. You'll all be running around like spring chickens when that stuff starts to work." "Thank you, Doctor, sir," said 6 voices in union. The patients filed out and left by the front door. O'Reilly retrieved the syringe dart, laid it with the others, turned to Barry and said, "Don't look so bloody disapproving, boy. It'll do them no harm. Half of them will feel better. I know it's only a placebo, but we're here to make people feel better." Yes, Dr. O'Reilly. There was some truth in what the older man said, and yet Barry shrugged. For the moment, he would keep his own counsel. So, there you are. There's an introduction to the redoubtable single Flaherty O'Reilly. Excuse me. People like Stephen Leacock and Garrison Keillor can sustain humour indefinitely. I'm afraid I cannot. It's a curse of the Irish. I tend to wander off occasionally into the slightly dreamy. And I'd like to read you just a little dreamy passage from another book now, if I may. This is about Mrs. Kincaid, and she is O'Reilly's very redoubtable housekeeper. She comes from County Cork, on the other end of the country where they talk like that. So we all have accents in Ireland, and if you listen carefully, Harry and I know we're close to each other. He's a Kerry man. Very wonderful people, the Kerry men. They, in Ireland, when it comes to humour, serve the same function as the Newfoundlanders do in Canada. We're happy to have them. And I decided that Mrs. Kincaid, the housekeeper, would come from County Cork. She is the Earth Mother type. She's widowed, and she has the gift. She can, on occasions, peer into the future. And you may think, this is rubbish, this is superstition. I am a well-trained medical research worker with a healthy cynicism for everything. My grandmother was one of 7 sisters. She was the 7th. She was the 6th. And she sat bolt upright one day and said, "Maggie's dead." Maggie was the 7th sister. And my grandmother was furious. The girls had been meant to die in sequence, and Maggie had jumped the queue. Because we all sniggered, you can't laugh at death. Half an hour later, the phone rang and said, "You're sorry to hear your sister's just died, Minnie." And she knew. So I gave that characteristic to Kinky, and I wanted to know how she got it. So I decided I'd tell her story of growing up in County Cork when she was a 16-year-old girl and falling in love, and also having a brush with the Irish underworld, the fairies. You all know about the Banshee, I'm sure you've heard about the Banshee. Well, again, in Irish, which I don't speak, but I have to have a few words for this. Ban is woman and she is fairy. So the Banshee is the woman fairy. The bad lot, the leprechauns are funny guys, but the bad lot are the Dúfshi, the black fairies. And in fact, they kill her sister's fiancé. And that's one of the subplots, the ghost story part of it. But while this is all going on, she meets a fisherman from Ring in County Cork. And she's 16. And for me, writing is not just telling a story and collecting the royalty check. It's also pushing myself and saying, can I tell a story that I can get the reader to see through the eyes of a 16-year-old girl? Look, God knows I've been in a lot of things in my life, but I have never been a 16-year-old girl. And I did think perhaps one way to try was on the evening when she started to fall in love, to describe the setting where it happened. And there used to be a fair in Ireland, Lunacy, 1st of August. It was a kind of harvest home. It was in honour of the god Lu. And they always had a marvellous party. Brian Friel wrote a wonderful play, Dancing at Lunacy. You may have seen the movie. You may not. And there were all kinds of customs there, like hand fasting. A young boy and a young girl could hold hands through a wicker fence. And they were officially married for a year and they could live together. And if they didn't like each other at the end of the year, they could split up and no social program happened. And of course they were dancing. There was dancing and music. There's always dancing and music in Ireland. And there's a grandstand next door to Lishlagun, which is a Neolithic hill fort in County Cork, which of course the fairies live in the hill forts. They are the people of the mounds, the people of the sheep. And I just want to give you one page of a little scene. I want you to imagine this. Dusk has fallen. The dance has been going on. Maureen, who's been 16-year-old, has been dancing with Pauline. And the evening was 3/4 gone before she knew it. Moths and night insects fluttered round the Japanese paper lanterns strung around the bandstand. In the distance, the lights of Clonakilty threw a low aurora over the valley. The fields were bright in the glow of the newly risen moon, and as she skipped and hopped, Maureen could see that it was waning, just past the half. It hung low over the hill fort, so low it looked within her grasp should she but reach out. As if using sparkling hands just beneath its surface, the distant sea caught moonbeams, then held and polished them before releasing them to rise shimmering from the calm water. "So," Pauline said breathlessly after the last set, "would you like to sit the next one out, Maureen?" "I would." Maureen hesitated, and the words came out in a rush. "Pauline, would you like to get a bit of quiet away from the music?" She could see the lantern light reflected in his eyes as he looked into hers and said quietly, "I'd like that very much." He took her hand and they strolled away from the bandstand toward the hill fort. She walked with him through the still night, where the dew fell gently on the springy grass, and the almond scent of the winds was as gentle as eiderdown. The squeaks of bats were muted descants to the trilling of a nightingale, and high overhead the stars bored diamond holes in the anthracite sky. "Tell me about yourself, Pauline Kincaid," she said. "I'd like to know." So, that's a wee bit different.